Okay. I can show you states 174 if that will help you. Do you recall the day that Laila Daniel came in to see you?
Yes.
And what day was that?
October 19, 2015.
And do you know who brought her in?
The foster mother.
And do you know the foster mother's name?
Yes, Jennifer Rosenbaum.
And what was the reason why Layla was brought in to see you on October 19th?
She came in for a leg injury.
Did you receive any sort of history from Ms. Rosenbaum?
I did read history. Do you want?
Yes.
Okay,
What was that history?
She reported that she had been at gymnastics and had fallen and then had been unable to walk after gymnastics, and that she had been at her maternal grandmother's a couple days before, and the report was that she had fallen in a hole. And then she had maybe perhaps re-injured her leg when she had fallen at gymnastics. But since she had been in gymnastics, she had not been able to walk on that leg.
Okay. So just so we can get the timing correct, did she indicate when the fall at her great-grandmother's house was?
She had said the fall had been a couple days prior.
And then the fall at gymnastics, did that occur the same day as the visit or a different day?
It looks like from the note that it was she'd fallen off the bar a couple of days later and won't walk, but it doesn't say on the note if that was the same day or prior.
Did you do an exam of Layla when she was brought in?
I did. So it's an urgent care center, so we do a pretty focused exam.
What do you mean by focused exam?
So what the patient tells us is, or what the parent tells us is wrong with the child, we do a directed exam at that area.
Can you give us an example?
So she came in reporting that her leg was hurt and she was limping, so we direct most of our attention at her leg.
Okay. And so what kind of exam do you do when a child comes in with that kind of complaint?
So we overall look at the child and then palpate the extremity that is involved, watch her walk, and manipulated the leg and then ordered x-rays.
Okay. What were your observations for Layla's visit that day?
It was a long time ago. She looked like a 2-year-old that was limping.
Okay. So you said you ordered x-rays.
Correct.
Now, did you have an opportunity to review those x-rays yourself?
Yes.
Okay. Are they also examined by somebody else?
So most of the time they're also examined by my attending in the urgent care, and then they're read by a pediatric radiologist at Eggleston.
And is that done electronically?
It's done electronically.
We've heard a little bit about Eggleston. Where is Eggleston?
Eggleston's in Decatur.
And so a radiologist up there will read them?
Radiologists up there will read them.
I want to show you what's been previously admitted into evidence as States Exhibit 176. Do you recognize States 176? It's behind you.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Okay. And what do you recognize? What do you recognize that to be?
So it's an X-ray of her right lower leg, and she has a fracture just below her knee at the top of the tibia, and there's a questionable bowing fracture of the fibula, which is the other lower leg bone.
So none of us are doctors in here. So if you could kind of tell us, if you wanted to use this, there's a laser pointer on there. If that'll help you.
So right there's a fracture, and it looks like this top part of the tibia is compressed a little bit, which when you fall quickly into a hole is what would happen.
So you thought that the falling into the hole could have contributed to that?
So yeah, falling into the hole and then re-injuring it if she's falling off a bar at gymnastics.
Let me ask you this. Given the history that was provided to you by Ms. Rosenbaum, did you have any concerns at that time about child abuse?
I did not have concerns about child abuse. I was a little bit concerned that maybe the child had been neglected when at the grandmother's house to allow her to fall in the hole, but felt that she was in safe care with the foster mother, so she was not in any imminent danger.
But if I understood you correctly, you thought that it was the sequence of events that made sense as far as this particular injury, correct?
Correct.
All right. And we can have the lights come up at this point. Thank you. What kind of treatment do you do for this kind of fracture at the urgent care?
We would put her in a splint and then have them follow up with an orthopedic doctor.
Okay. So you don't do casting there?
We don't do casting.
Do you recall if Dr. Eanes actually observed the x-ray in this particular case at the time?
I don't recall.
Did you ever receive a call from any other doctors for this particular case?
I received a call from the orthopedic doctor a couple of days later. I guess he was not happy about the child, and he had sent the child up to Eggleston for evaluation, I believe, after he'd seen the child.
Did you ever have any further involvement in treating Laila Daniel at any other point in her life?
No.
Nothing further this time.
Thank you. Ross.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Corinne Mull. I have just a few questions for you. If I don't speak up loud enough, please let me know if I'm not clear. You diagnosed Layla otherwise as healthy and well-nourished, correct?
I didn't diagnose her as that, but she appeared to be healthy and well-nourished.
She appeared to be healthy and well-nourished. In fact, you noted that. You noted she was well-developed and well-nourished.
Correct.
And you didn't make any notation with regards to abuse or anything of the sort?
No.
Thank you. I don't have anything further.
Nothing further.
All right, thank you, ma'am. Discussion. Any objections to this being excused?
No, Judge.
Okay. And you're excused. The state will call its next witness.
State calls Dr. John Eanes,
John Eames.
E-A-N-E-S.
Okay. Right here, please, doctor. Mr. Chase, will swear you in.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You can put your hand down, take a seat. Take a seat.
Thank you.
Can you please state your true and correct name for the record?
My name is John T. Eanes II.
And can you spell your last name for us?
E-A-N as in November, E-S as in Sierra.
And sir, how are you currently employed?
I'm employed from the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta as the medical director for utilization management and case management.
Okay. And how long have you been in that position?
3 years, sir.
Prior to that, where were you working?
But prior to that, I was working at the urgent care system for children's at the Hudson Bridge.
How long were you at Hudson Bridge?
Oh my, at least 3 years, I believe. I'd have to look back at that. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Were you working there in 2015?
I believe so, yes.
Tell us a little bit about your educational background.
I'm a medical doctor. I was trained at the Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia. That was my undergraduate. Then I went through the military and went through the Uniformed Services University of Health Sciences in Bethesda, Maryland. Then did internship at William Beaumont Army Medical Center in El Paso, Texas, and residency at Walter Reed.
And how long have you been a pediatrician?
Let's see, 96. 96 was when I graduated medical school, completed residency in 99, and I've been a pediatrician since.
And how many years were you in the urgent care type setting?
I would have to look back because I was doing it part-time for quite a while, so it was at least 6 years, I believe.
Did you ever have an opportunity to treat a patient by the name of Laila Daniel?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And do you recall the date that you first treated Laila Daniel?
I'd have to look back exactly. This is the record here.
Sure. Or I can provide you with states 173.
It was 173. Yeah.
Provide you this.
Yeah. That had the dates that she was actually. You have to forgive me. I didn't recall the exact date.
That's okay.
This was the consent form. Make sure this was mine that I saw. I apologize. This is her account. Was that the 426 appointment? Hold on. There's a couple accounts. I just want to make sure I'm looking at the right record before I say the exact date. Where is my note? Hold on 1 second. There it is. This would have been, oh, no, that was the second encounter. So that was date 10/19. So this must have been 6/13, I believe.
Okay. So June 13th, 2015?
I believe so. My apologies. I didn't memorize the dates.
That's okay.
That is correct. 6/13.
All right. And where were you working on June 13th?
Hudson Bridge, urgent care.
And who was Layla brought in by?
It was a foster mother, if I remember the name correctly. I've got to look back here and see. Oops, who was the mom? Patricia Lambert. Is that correct?
And what was the reason why Layla was brought to you on June 13th of 2015?
She had been vomiting at the time.
Did she give any more information about the history of vomiting from that day or the days leading up?
It had been indicated there were numerous episodes of vomiting prior to the foster mother picking the patient up, but and had one additional episode after she picked her up, but no other symptoms.
Okay. Were any, the medical history, was any sort of medical conditions provided to you as part of the medical history?
They denied any other medical history, although they did indicate that the child was in foster care for maternal meth use.
Was there any mention of any previous physical abuse to the child?
No, sir.
Now, what did you do as far as the physical exam of Layla on that day?
It'd be a focused exam looking at heart and lungs, abdomen, a general look at the skin, the head, eyes, ears, nose, throat.
Okay. And did you make any notes regarding the height and weight of the child?
We had a weight of 10.6 kilograms. I don't believe we did a height that day.
And is that within normal range?
I believe so. I'd have to look at the growth chart, but typically, yes.
Did anything appear to be abnormal as far as her nourishment that particular day?
No, she seemed to be doing quite well.
And what else did you do as part of your exam?
The head, eyes, ears, nose, throat, we just kind of look at it, all her parts around her head, her chest, abdomen, expose and examine her abdomen, make sure there's no evidence of any serious illness.
Okay. Now, when you looked at the abdomen, did you note anything unusual about the abdomen?
No, not on the exam.
If you had, would you have noted it?
Typically, yes.
I want to show you State's Exhibit 45.
Okay. Is this the picture? That picture?
That picture right there.
Yes.
Not confused, the top picture right there. The area underneath the belly button, did you observe that, that hypopigmented area when you examined Laila Daniel?
No, sir.
Had you have observed that, would you have noted it?
That's a significant discoloration, so yes.
I don't think it calls back. It's simply asking if that's something that he would have, if he had seen, he would have made sure to include in his records.
Yeah.
You can
with that discoloration, that would have been commented on, just because it's an unusual type of hypopigmented area.
As a pediatrician, is it part of your training to identify potential signs of child abuse?
Yes.
And what kind of things do you look for when you're evaluating potential signs of child abuse?
Unusual physical exam findings, bruising, pattern bruising. It's kind of a spectrum of things. Some of the symptoms can be subtle, so you've got to look for different items.
And when Ms. Lambert brought Layla in on that day, did you have any concerns about potential child abuse on that day?
No, sir.
The mics can come up for now. Thank you. Doctor, and you have a copy of the medical records. Was Layla ever seen at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta on August 12th of 2015?
Not per the records.
Did you ever have, any other contact with a medical case involving Laila Daniel?
I had a contact later as a supervising physician for physician assistant.
So tell us about that. Tell us about how that supervising position works regarding physician assistants.
When the urgent care facility, the physician assistants will do a lot of additional help for the providers, and we just review the charts for completeness and make sure that the documentation appears appropriate.
And do you recall the date of the visit that you reviewed the chart?
That was on 10/19.
And who was the child seen by on 10/19?
I believe it was Tina Lowe, if I remember correctly. Let me double check here. Yeah, Christina Lowe.
And what was the reason why she was brought in?
Let me look back here real quick. Leg complaint, not weight bearing, and now limping on the leg.
And did you actually see Laila Daniel that day?
No, sir.
Is it common for you to not see the patient when they come in if they're seen by another provider?
If the physician assistant feels comfortable with the case, yes, we won't see them.
What about the x-rays? Did you see any of the x-rays on 10/19?
No, I did not. I just reviewed the reports.
Did you ever see the x-rays?
Yes. A couple days later, we received a call from the orthopedics expressing concern about the x-rays, and then we saw them.
I don't think she's really said it. This simply goes to why he looked at the x-rays. I'm not sure if it's a matter of certain. It simply goes to why he went back and started looking at the x-ray. Sir, you can continue.
A couple days later, we received a call from the orthopedics expressing concern about the x-rays. At that time, I reviewed the x-rays.
Okay. And when you reviewed the x-rays, did you have any concerns yourself?
It was an unusual fracture.
I'm showing you was previously admitted to State's Exhibit 176. You said it's an unusual fracture. Tell us what you mean by that, and I'll hand you a laser pointer. If that might help you explain to the jury.
Oops, make sure I know what I'm doing before I shoot anybody. There, yeah. The area of fracture is very close to the knee itself, which requires an enormous amount of force. And so when I would see a fracture like that, the other risk is to the growth plates themselves. So this would have been a fracture we would have recommended talking to the orthopedic doctor about.
Okay. And why? So you say that it's it would have required an enormous amount of force.
This is a thick portion of the bone, so it's not something you just simply break per se. You wouldn't break it by a simple fall, or it'd be something you know that there was an injury at the time.
Okay. So a simple fall would not cause this kind of fracture.
Correct.
What about pain? Would this type of fracture cause pain?
Easily.
How much pain?
A lot.
Would it be the type of pain that would be immediately known to the child?
Correct.
What about those around the child?
Easily.
Now, from this X-ray, can you tell anything regarding the timing of when this injury could have been inflicted?
The exact time you wouldn't be able to decipher. However, it's a recent injury. It occurred very shortly.
And in layman's terms, could you give us the range?
I would expect within the last day.
Now, you had mentioned that you had spoken to the orthopedic doctor, correct?
Correct.
After speaking with the orthopedic doctor and looking at this X-ray, what, if anything, did you do?
Well, there's a couple things. The orthopedic doctor expressed concerns, and we recommended, if he was concerned about the injury, to refer to the ER or try to help. The other thing that occurred in this is I contacted the physician assistant because I was a little concerned about the X-ray report to see if she had additional information not documented in the chart.
Okay. And did anything that you learned from her, and you don't tell us what she said, but is there anything that you learned from her that that affected your opinion or caused you any additional concern?
She had made some additional comments supporting the case, and I had indicated that these needed to be documented in the chart.
Okay. Did you call DFACS or law enforcement or anything of that nature?
No, sir. I wasn't directly seeing the patient, so we'd made recommendations to the orthopedics if they were concerned, but that's all we did.
Okay. Thank you.
Cross.
Just briefly, Dr. Hughes, my name is Colleen Mull. I just have
Nice to meet
a
you,
couple
ma'am.
questions for you today. Please let me know if I'm not speaking loud enough or you can't
Oh,
understand me.
absolutely, ma'am.
This injury was documented in your office as an injury consistent with accident falling in a hole and then falling in gymnastics, wasn't it?
That's what was reported in the chart, correct.
Thank you, that's all I have.
Thanks, ma'am.
No, all right, thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. You want me to leave these here, sir?
Mr. Trace, do you have any direction to this witness as to what to do with these exhibits?
Oh, I can take them back.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
And your excuse, unless you said.
Nothing to say.
Okay.
Ms. Mull, did the doctor be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. State calls next witness.
State calls Dr. Sean Duxbury.
Dr. Sean Duxbury. If you please, sir.
Please raise your right hand to be sworn. Raise your right hand for me. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You can put your hand down. Please state your true and correct name for the record.
Gilbert Sean Duxbury.
Okay. You just want to probably talk a little bit closer to the mic.
Gilbert Sean Duxbury.
Can you spell your name for us?
Gilbert Duxbury.
Sir, how are you currently employed?
Currently, I'm on a hiatus between two jobs. I was at Texas Children's Hospital, and I'll be starting at University of New Mexico in a month.
And what are you going to be doing at the University of New Mexico?
Pediatric orthopedics.
And what were you doing at Texas Children's Hospital?
Pediatric orthopedics with the emphasis in spine surgery and trauma.
And tell us a little bit more about your educational background.
School. I went to graduate school at Georgia State. I went to medical school at University of Alabama at Birmingham. Then I did my residency at Atlanta Medical Center.
And what was your residency in?
Orthopedic surgery. And then I did a pediatric orthopedic fellowship at Emory, based out of Eggleston.
Now, tell us a little bit more about the orthopedic fellowship. How is that different than just general orthopedics?
Dealing with just kids and pediatric orthopedic problems. So instead of adult fractures, adult orthopedic problems, dealing with pediatric specific only children.
And are orthopedics related to children different than the orthopedics related to adults?
Yes,
Can be.
they can be.
Okay. Tell us.
Medical licensure?
Yes.
I'm licensed in Texas, and I will be licensed in New Mexico in a few weeks.
Okay. Do you have any teaching positions, or have you in the past?
I'm assistant professor at Texas Hospital and assistant professor at Georgia State. Oh, I'm sorry, at New Mexico.
Have you ever done any research in the field of orthopedics?
I have.
And just tell us a little bit about that briefly.
Mostly, but I've also done, when I was in medical school, some research into orthopedic trauma.
Dr. Duxbury as an expert in the field of pediatric orthopedics.
Is it good for that purpose by the court?
Thank you, Judge. Dr. Duxbury, I first want to talk to you about a certain case. Did you ever have an opportunity to treat a patient by the name of Laila Daniel?
I did.
And do you recall the date that you treated Laila Daniel?
I do not recall the date.
Your Honor, at this time I move into the record. The medical records associated with Dr. Duxbury's treatment, there is a corresponding business record certification that's self-authenticating. I'm going to show you State Exhibit 182. Would this help you with some of the details?
Yes.
You could tell us the date that you treated Laila Daniel.
I saw the patient on October 20th, 2015.
And do you have an independent recollection of this particular visit?
I do.
And why is that?
It stood out to me because I was very concerned that it was a non-accidental trauma case.
What was the reason why Layla was in your office?
She was brought to me because she had been seen the day before, I believe, by one of the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta urgent cares who had referred her to me for a lower leg fracture.
And when you got the case, did you also get the X-rays that were associated with this particular case?
I did.
And did you have any concerns when you looked at the X-rays?
Not just from the X-rays, no. Although it was somewhat of an unusual fracture pattern for somebody the patient's age.
So it was the fracture pattern. Tell us a little bit more about why that was concerning to you.
It was a complete fracture of the proximal tibia, which requires a fair amount of force to generate, usually more force than somebody that's the patient's age can generate.
Let's back up and what this is not working at the moment. See if that'll fix that. But let's back up and talk a little bit about the history. Were you given a history regarding how Layla injured herself?
I was.
Well, let me ask you this. Who provided that history?
It would have been the foster mother.
And do you have a name for the foster mother?
I don't recall the name.
Is it in the records that have been?
It is. Jennifer Rosenbaum.
And when the patients come and see you, do they actually fill out a form regarding the history?
They do.
Okay. And is that included in those records?
It is.
All right, I can see that back from you. Put it back in public. All right, so to do an overview real quick. This section over here on the left, this section, who would this have been filled out by?
That would be filled out by the guardian of the patient.
And in this particular case, was that signed by someone?
Yes.
Is the signature right here?
Correct.
Now, this section above it, here that I'm pointing to, kind of on the right, who fills out that?
That's filled out by one of my assistants in clinic,
And where do they get that information from?
directly from speaking with the guardian.
So based upon the history that we see here today, or we see on this form, I should say, what was the history that was provided to you regarding how this child injured themselves?
The history that was given was that initially the patient had been playing at her grandmother's house and fell into a hole injuring her leg, and then subsequently the next day at gymnastics had fallen again and injured herself the same leg.
Now, did Ms. Rosenbaum provide specific dates in this history?
She did. She said the first case was on October 15th, and the next occurrence was on October 16th.
The October 15th, what did she say caused the injury on October 15th?
She said that she had stepped into a hole, I believe.
And the October 16th, what did she say happened then?
On October 16th, she said she lifted her leg for a pike and fell.
Are you familiar with that term is, a pike?
I think I know what a pike is.
Okay. Did she also write anything regarding the child's history? Did she write anything herself regarding the child's history?
No. She stated that the patient was the second of 3 children of 3 pregnancies, that she didn't have any major illnesses, no operations, no medications, no allergies to medications, and she stated that she was adopted.
Okay. Now, what does it say underneath adopted?
History of abuse.
So you indicated that she had actually been to Hudson Bridge prior to coming to see you, correct?
Yes, sir.
Is that pretty standard procedure for them to go to the urgent care and then come see you?
Yes.
So let's look at the x-ray in this case. The laser pointer, I think, is still up with you. Right there. What are we looking at, and I guess what caused you concern based upon the history that you received?
So this is your knee joint, and it's looking at it from the front of your body. So this is the end of the big bone in your upper leg, and these are your 2 bones in your lower leg. So this is called the proximal tibia, and this is called the distal femur. There is a complete proximal tibial fracture, which comes through this part of the bone is called the metaphyseal bone, that comes through the metaphyseal region of the bone. Complete meaning that the fracture goes all the way across the bone, that if you took this bone apart, these 2 bones wouldn't be attached through the fracture at all.
And the history that was provided to you, did that seem consistent with the injury that you were observing on x-ray?
So, possibly, if she stepped into a very large hole going very fast and fell, but that would make it, but it's unlikely still that she would have that fracture pattern.
So if she fell in a large hole at high velocity, it could be possible but unlikely. Is that correct?
It could be.
Okay. What about falling off of a bar or a beam in gymnastics?
Most likely not, depending on how high the beam was. If the beam was 5 or 6 feet off the ground, perhaps.
What if the beam was only a couple feet off the ground?
No.
This fracture would not be possible.
It should not be possible. She shouldn't be able to generate enough force to cause that fracture. And I don't know how much I'm allowed to. If she had had this injury the first day stepping in the hole, there isn't any way that she would have been able to be participating in gymnastics the next day.
Okay. Now, what about a combination of the two? Hurting the bone perhaps slightly one day and then even more the next day?
If she had fractured the bone the first day, she wouldn't have been walking on it after the fracture.
How painful is this type of injury?
It's painful.
Would it be known pretty easily to those around a child?
Yes.
How do children normally express pain when they have broken limbs?
They won't use the limb.
Did you conduct a physical examination of Layla?
I did.
And what did you note from the physical examination?
So she was difficult to examine. She didn't cooperate. She was very fussy. It's difficult to get 2-year-olds to cooperate with a physical exam to start with. And when they're hurt, they're even more reluctant. And oftentimes they don't particularly want to be at doctor's offices. So she had pain and swelling around her knee on the affected side, and I didn't notice anything else significant at the time.
Okay. Now, would you have looked at the entire body and done a full body exam of Layla?
I would have.
Did you notice anything at that point, any bruising at that point?
I didn't.
Did you examine the arms at that point?
I did.
And did you notice anything unusual about the arms?
I did not.
Now, did you ever discuss your concerns with any other treatment providers?
I did.
And who were those providers that you discussed your concerns with?
The day that she presented to clinic, I called the urgent care, the CHOA urgent care that she had been seen at initially, and referred her to me and discussed the injury and my concern for non-accidental trauma with the attending emergency room physician there.
Okay.
And then subsequently, I wound up discussing the patient with a social worker and a child protective service worker at Eggleston, and also one of the nurse practitioners, I believe she was a mid-level at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. Or I'm sorry, at the time it was Children's Orthopedics of Atlanta, which is now Children's Healthcare of Atlanta Orthopedics.
Okay. Now, I'll back up a little bit. First, let me ask you this. What was the time frame between when the first injury allegedly happened and when she came or first saw treatment? I can put this back up on the screen for you if that helps you.
It was close to a week.
What was the date?
The date that they said the injury, they said that, can you pull it down a little bit? Oh, on 10, they said it happened on 10/15, and then I saw the patient on the 20th.
Okay. And she had been to Hudson Bridge the day before?
I believe so.
So that was about a 4-day delay?
Yes.
Is there anything regarding the delay that causes you concern?
Yes, it's one of the, when you look at a list of risks associated with non-accidental trauma, one of the big red flags is delay in treatment.
And why is that?
Because if your child has a broken leg or an injury, isn't using a leg, you would expect that you would take them to a provider quickly and not wait to have them see a provider after the injury.
Now, the fracture that we saw on the screen, a complete tibia fracture like that, is this a common fracture to see in children?
A complete tibia fracture in that region and in somebody her age is not common.
Now, you said that you called over to Hudson Bridge, correct?
Yes.
And you discussed your concerns with them. Now, what did you do after you discussed your concerns with the providers over at Hudson Bridge?
The day when the patient was in clinic.
That's correct. The day the patient was in clinic.
So I splinted the patient and I asked them to go to the Eggleston Emergency Department.
And why did you ask them to go to the Eggleston Emergency Department?
So in the community clinic, I don't have the ability to do a non-accidental trauma workup.
And what is a non-accidental trauma workup?
The initial workup is doing trauma labs, which is measuring certain enzymes, liver enzymes, pancreatic enzymes, blood count, and then doing a complete body x-ray it's called a skeletal survey, where you're looking for other fractures.
And did you express this directly to the foster mother?
I don't remember.
Did you tell them they needed to go to Eggleston?
I did.
And is it saying you don't remember exactly what you said?
I don't remember exactly what I said to the family, but I was explicit that they needed to go to Eggleston that day straight from the clinic.
Did you do anything in your medical records to memorialize your visit?
Yes, I believe so.
Was there a letter that was sent?
There was a letter that was sent to Seth Carson and Karen, who was a primary care provider that I had lots of referrals from in my Stockbridge office.
Okay. And in that letter, did you write anything regarding your concerns?
I did.
And I'm showing what's on the screen is page 182, the medical records. If you could read the history of present illness.
So this is a 2-year-old who, per mother's report, initially injured herself on 10/15, almost a week ago, playing in the backyard at her Nana's house, and she fell into a hole. The next day she was at gymnastics practice. She lifted up her leg for a pike and fell, apparently re-injuring the leg, at which point, according to the mom, she stopped bearing weight on the extremity. They then waited until 10/19, so over the weekend, to take her in for evaluation. She was taken to the children urgent care last night, where x-rays showed a proximal tibia fracture. She was placed into a splint and sent here for follow-up.
Did you ever do anything to follow up to see if they had actually gone to Children's Healthcare like you instructed?
I did. So I had a very close working relationship with the residents at Emory, which are the initial contacts for orthopedics at Eggleston. I called the resident who was on call and let them know that the patient should be coming. I also called the ER and let them know that they should be coming.
To your knowledge, did Ms. Rosenbaum ever take Laila Daniel to Eggleston?
She did not. So I followed up that night by looking at Epic to see if they had ever showed up at the ER, and they had not.
And what is Epic?
Epic is a electronic medical record that Children's Health Care of Atlanta uses. It's accessible from anywhere, so you can look, and any visit in there would be documented.
Do you recall if Ms. Rosenbaum ever said anything acknowledging the need to go to Eggleston?
She did. She said she would go.
Did she say when she would go?
She said she would go that afternoon. I asked her to leave immediately and go to the emergency department, and she acknowledged that she would go, that they were on their way.
So later that night when you called, they had not gone?
I checked in Epic, and they had not gone, and I called my resident and confirmed that they had not showed up and that they were not waiting to be seen. Sometimes you can be wait to be seen for a long time out in the waiting room, and they weren't there.
Did you do anything else to follow up?
I did. The next day, I called up to Eggleston and called the ED, which put me in contact with one of the social workers who was there then, said that they had CPS in-house, and talked to them about the case.
And what is CPS?
Child Protective Services.
So the information you received at Child Protective Services was involved?
So it was at that point that I got a clear understanding that there was already an open defects case on this patient, and that they were following her.
So your understanding was that DFACS was following this child?
Yes.
After that, did that do anything to allay the concerns that you had?
I don't remember, but apparently not, because I still made other phone calls.
Okay, and tell us about that.
So after that, I could see in Epic that the patient was seeing another provider from a different group. And I called that provider and relayed my concerns to them about the patient.
After that point, did you have any further treatment and involvement in the treatment of Laila Daniel?
I did not.
Doctor, I want to show you some other x-rays, okay? I want to show you what's been previously admitted as State Exhibit 130. Just for the record, this is the x-ray from Laila Daniel that was taken on November 17th of 2015. What are we looking at here?
So that is a view of part of the humerus, the large bone in the upper arm, and then both the bones in the forearm, and a partial view or a complete view of her wrist and part of her hand.
And you did not actually treat Laila on November 17th, correct?
I did not. I splinted the leg.
Back in October, correct?
Right, and asked them to follow up at Eggleston. No.
But looking at this particular X-ray, just as an expert in this field, what do you see? What do you see when looking at this X-ray?
There's a transverse, non-displaced fracture of her ulna.
So in English, what does that mean?
That means that she has a break in her ulna that isn't moved out of place. The bone is still lined up where it should be. It's in the middle of the bone, and there's also a fair amount of healing around the fracture.
Okay. Let's talk first about the mechanism. Can you tell anything regarding the mechanism of how a break like this occurs?
It's called a nightstick fracture.
Why is it called a nightstick
It's
fracture?
called a nightstick fracture from back when law enforcement used to carry nightsticks. And it's the natural response of somebody being attacked to put their arm up like this. And if you put your arm up like that and get hit by a nightstick, you could get a fracture of the ulna. So it actually has a pseudonym that goes along with it. Was that common from the mechanism.
What other types of things could cause this type of fracture?
Getting hit, a blunt force trauma to the side of the arm that the ulna is on. That's about the only thing that can cause that fracture.
Now, you mentioned there's some healing here. How can you tell that there is healing here?
So all of that fluffy, cotton ball looking.
If you need to, you can get up and with the pointer, and we have the
I
old school
forgot I
pointer
had
too.
the
That's
pointer.
better.
All of this is called callus. So all this, and that's called bridging callus. When the callus goes across the fracture site, it's called bridging callus, and that's the way fractures that are treated by cast immobilization or no immobilization heal. So at first there just would have been a line that goes across right here if you had seen her early on in this fracture. Within about 10 days, this callus would start to form. And the callus forms almost like an onion skin or an onion in that it forms layers. And as that callus gets thicker and thicker and thicker, it keeps the bone from wiggling. And once the bone stops wiggling enough, the cells that take bone away and form bone come in and reunite the fracture. So it's basically the body splinting the fracture so that those cells can then come in and do their job and heal the bone up.
And is this a type of healing that would occur, you said, if the arm had not been splinted?
Yes. Even it's the kind of healing that would have occurred if the arm had been splinted. There's two mechanisms that bone can heal by, main mechanisms, either primary healing or secondary healing. This is called secondary healing. Primary healing is if you do a surgery and you put a plate and screws to hold the fracture in place. The fracture can't wiggle then, and you don't get a bunch of callus formation like this. In children, it's very rare to put plates and screws in or any sort of orthopedic implant because they heal so well, especially at 2 years old, that you can put the bone almost anywhere, leave it where it is, and they grow so much that the bone heals back together. And then as they grow a little bit more, it remodels, excuse me, so that eventually the fracture disappears.
Okay, so I guess this goes back to the kids. Kids sometimes heal a little bit differently than adults.
Yes.
Okay. And so you said that at a certain point you wouldn't even be able to see the fracture line anymore.
If you had let this go and taken the x-ray again in 6 months, you never would have known the fracture was there.
Let's talk about, we talked about that the callus begins to appear at about
10 days.
10 days. What about this being on the other side? How old could this be?
By looking at the fracture, I would say that it's no more than 3 to 4 weeks old at the most.
Are you familiar with the term non-union fracture?
I am.
And what is a non-union fracture?
A non-union is when the two ends of the bone do not heal back together.
And is that what we are looking at here?
No, that's normal healing in a pediatric fracture.
Is there any evidence whatsoever from looking at that photograph or from that x-ray that there is any sort of non-union in here?
No, that's perfectly normal looking for that fracture.
Now, how likely is it for a 2-year-old to have a non-union fracture?
It's almost unheard of.
When would you see a non-union fracture?
Non-unions usually happen in adults, and usually adults that have comorbidities, such as diabetes, have other things going on, that have diabetes, or they have some sort of vascular problem, or they've had a bad infection. Children, I've never seen a non-union in one of my patients.
Well, I'm looking into evidence dates 183 through 186, which is self-authenticating medical records from Millie Place from Piedmont Henry Hospital. The business record certification is attached.
Amen.
Doctor, I also want to show you states 184. What are we looking at in states 184?
That's an x-ray of a pediatric patient's elbow. It would technically be called an oblique view because it's looking at an angle, which shows a healing fracture at the end of the humerus right there.
How can you tell that that's a healing fracture from what you're pointing at?
This is called periosteal reaction. Everybody's bone is surrounded by a tissue called periosteum. In children, the periosteum is very thick and robust because their bone is growing so much and changing so much. As we get older, it gets very thin. But in somebody this patient's age, the periosteum will be very thick. And when you have a fracture, you get, even if you can't see the fracture initially on an x-ray, which would be called an occult, which happens a lot around elbows. If you come back and take an x-ray at 2 or 3 weeks, you'll see this periosteal reaction forming, tracking up, and then as the fracture heals, that will go away within 3 or 4 months.
I'm just going to also show states 185 and 186. Is there anything different that we can see in this particular x-ray?
There's still periosteal reaction there. There appears to be a fracture over on the lateral condyle of the bone over here. This is the lateral condyle. So look, there's a lucency through there, but you can still see this periosteal reaction coming up.
In stage 186.
There's really no visible fracture healing on this. There might be a very, very, very mild periosteal reaction right there.
And so, from what you can see, how old would this injury have been from what you can see on X-ray? And I can move it back to the first.
Yeah.
I can move back to 184.
This would probably be about between 2 to 3 weeks old.
I want to go back to stage 130 very quickly, just regarding the timing again. And this is looking at Layla's ulna from that was taken on November 17th of 2015. Yeah, you said you start to see the callus at about how long?
So part of it depends on patient age. In very young patients, you see it very, very, very quickly. As patients get to be teenagers, you don't see it as quickly. They start to heal more like an adult. In somebody 2 years of age, you'll start to see the healing in callus usually around 10 days.
And then you also said that it could be this could also be up to about 3 to 4 weeks, correct?
That probably looks like it's about, I would say, median of 3.
Median of 3.
Right.
Okay. So from looking at that, the fracture probably occurred within that time period of 10 days up to about 3 weeks.
Yes.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you, Ross.
Dr. Duxbury, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Corinne Mall. I just have a few questions for you.
Yes, ma'am.
If you can't understand what I'm saying, I'm not speaking loud enough, please let me know. Dr. Duxbury, you saw her on the 20th,
Yes,
correct?
yes, ma'am.
And you saw her for the purpose of putting a cast on her, correct?
I saw her for the purpose of treating the fracture, which doesn't necessarily intending, especially in an early fracture, it doesn't involve putting a cast on immediately.
But you did not treat it, did you?
Define treat. I saw the patient and I put her into a splint, which would be the initial treatment for that fracture.
Didn't she come to you in a splint?
She did, but you have to take the splint off to examine the extremity.
So you put the splint back on.
Yes, ma'am.
And then you told her to go to Eggleston.
Yes,
to show
ma'am.
her. She had just come from Showa Urgent Care, and you were sending her back to Showa Eggleston, correct?
Yes.
Now, I just want to talk a little bit about your medical records that we had looked at. This letter to Dr. Sankaran just says that you are concerned about the history of this child, correct?
No, ma'am. It says I'm concerned for non-accidental trauma in this case.
Okay, and where do you say that?
Can you put the record up? So go down to the bottom. Keep going down. There should be another page. So it says, I'm a little concerned about the history of this child and the amount of time it took for the urgent care to be worked up, so I'm having her go to Eggleston where she can be evaluated by social work. Meaning that I'm concerned about the history of this fracture, why it took so long for the patient to receive care for it, why the story changed and didn't seem to be inconsistent. There was a lot of red flags with this patient for non-accidental trauma.
Did you say non-accidental trauma anywhere in the letter?
No.
In fact, Dr. Duxbury, when you talk about inconsistencies, what inconsistencies are you talking about?
So major red flags for non-accidental trauma: delay in care, changing story.
How did the story change?
So the time frame kept changing while I talked to her. The mechanism where you're saying, well, first she injured herself by falling into a hole, and then the next day she injured herself at practice, that's not consistent with something that would happen.
Okay. But her story did not change. She said she came to you and said that the child had fallen into a hole, and she told you the child had then had a second occurrence and fell into as a result of gymnastics.
Okay, fair enough.
And it's true also that she told you she was the foster mother.
She said that she was the foster mother. She never mentioned that the patient was in defects care.
But she never told, well, by definition, if she's in foster mother, she's in defects care.
I don't know whether that's true or not.
Okay, well, isn't it true that she did not say anything to you about being adopted, the child being adopted?
It says on the intake form that she's adopted. She wrote that.
She did not write adopted. She did write foster mother, didn't she?
She wrote adopted right there underneath reason, adopted, history of abuse.
Are you trying to say that Pt.1 Henry is written by the same person as wrote adopted?
Yes,
So she would have written, you are telling this jury, she would have written foster mother on the right-hand side and adopted on the left-hand side.
everything on the left-hand side of the form was filled out by the guardian.
You don't know that to be the case. That's what was planned. But in fact, somebody else wrote adopted on there, not the same person that wrote Piedmont Henry. And all of these were. This is not the same handwriting.
Okay. I can't confirm that.
She checked no to the question, was there a family history of this or a similar problem?
I'm sorry, she checked.
She checked no to that, didn't she? About
Was-
whether there was a family history of this.
Family history of fracture?
Yes.
She did check no to that.
And she also checked no to any past medical history, didn't she?
Correct.
But somebody wrote in history of abuse under adopted, correct? HX is history.
It says history of abuse.
Now, is it not true, doctor, that you and Ms. Rosenbaum had a discussion about whether or not, about your price list? Isn't that correct?
About my price list?
Yes.
No, that isn't something I would discuss.
And you did not discuss what you would cover by Medicaid and what you wouldn't?
I can't discuss that, and I don't know what Medicaid covers. I don't have anything to do with billing. All I do, I see the patients, I provide the treatment plan, but as far as the billing side of it goes, I have nothing to do with that.
Someone in your office has something to do with that, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Isn't it true that Ms. Rosenbaum went directly to another doctor?
No, that's not true.
Why
It's
is
my
that?
understanding she went several days later to another doctor.
How many days later?
I believe 2 or 3.
2 or 3 days later from when you saw her,
Yes, ma'am.
to Dr. Coppinger.
I'm not sure who Dr. Coppinger is.
But you're saying that 2 or 3 days after she saw you, she went to see another doctor.
I believe she went to go see a mid-level provider.
And you say that was 2 to 3 days.
I believe so. I'm not sure on the exact timeline after that. I know that she didn't go to Eggleston that day, and that it took several days after that for her to be seen by somebody else.
Where in your medical records, doctor, is the referral sheet for Eggleston?
There is no referral to Eggleston.
So there's no mention here of, no sheet given to her saying to go to Eggleston, just your verbal,
You wouldn't do a referral sheet to Eggleston.
you would just tell her to go to Eggleston.
Yes. Referral sheets are required when they're seeing another provider that insurance would require a referral for. There is no referral required to go to emergency department.
But usually when somebody tells somebody to go to another establishment, you provide them with documentation that they should do so.
No, ma'am.
Okay.
We would have provided her with the address of Eggleston, and we would have alerted them to let them know that she was coming.
And where is that reflected in your notes?
It's not.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Doctor, is the letter that we saw that's in the medical records part of the medical record?
Yeah, I'm sorry, yes,
That letter's part of the medical
it
record?
is.
Right. I mean, what's the date on that document?
10/20/2015.
Okay. And in that document, do you actually mention the need for her to go to Eggleston?
Yes.
This is not something you're making up today, correct?
No.
And why would you send someone to Eggleston versus back to, say, Hudson Bridge?
So, although they both are called Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, they're very different entities. Hudson Bridge is an urgent care. It's a portal. It's somewhere to see minor injuries and treatment. Eggleston is the only level 1 pediatric trauma center in the state of Georgia. So if you're concerned, they are a tertiary care facility where all of the needed resources are in one place to do a proper workup. You have emergency medicine doctors, pediatricians, orthopedists, access to imaging, access to labs at that time, social work and child protective services all underneath the same roof.
Are you familiar with the Stephanie V. Blank Center for Safe and Healthy Children?
I'm sorry?
Are you familiar with the Stephanie V. Blank Center for Safe and Healthy Children, the child protecting team?
At Eggleston?
Yes.
I've dealt with them, yes.
And are they also contained at the Eggleston campus?
There is, to my understanding, in-house child protective services.
The fact that there was a further delay between your visit and when she went to go see Mr. Coppinger, does that cause you any more concern?
Yes.
And why is that?
So another red flag for non-accidental trauma is provider shopping.
What do you mean by that term?
Seeing multiple providers.
And why is that concerning?
Well, you have to question why. If it's a straightforward injury, why are they? It's not like they're going for a second opinion. They're seeing multiple providers for the same problem.
Did Ms. Rosenbaum seem confused at all when you told her she needed to go to Eggleston?
No.
Did it appear to you that she didn't understand your directions when you told her to go to Eggleston?
No, she acknowledged that she needed to go to Eggleston.
Nothing further.
Anything in letter to Dr. Sankaran that reflects you gave a copy of that letter to Jennifer Rosenbaum?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Anything in the letter to Dr. Sankaran that reflects that you gave a copy of the letter to Jennifer Rosenbaum?
In order for her to get a copy of a medical record, she would have to request it through the medical records department. That's the law.
But you did not give her a copy of the letter.
I don't know if she asked for a copy of the letter.
In fact, isn't it true that sometimes people don't have the best of bedside manners? Isn't that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And isn't it true that people go to other places?
That's true.
And isn't it true that sometimes one doctor doesn't cover certain procedures or include certain treatment in their Medicare coverage?
There was no treatment that wasn't covered. I took as far as I know, every insurance that is available in the state of Georgia, including Medicare and Medicaid, whereas I believe the provider she went to afterwards does not see Medicaid and Medicare patients.
But you don't know that, do you?
Excuse me?
You don't know that to be the case.
As far as I know, Children's Orthopedics of Atlanta did not take Medicare. That the only two Medicare or Medicaid providers in the state for pediatric orthopedics were Emory and Pediatric Orthopedic Associates.
So you don't know much about billing in your office, but you do know about the billing in somebody else's office.
I know what insurance they took.
Isn't it true, doctor, that 2 to 3 days is sometimes the time it takes to get an appointment?
For an urgent care, probably not.
But for an orthopedist?
No, we would regularly see people the next day.
But other providers might have full appointment schedules, correct?
They might.
And they might take 2 or 3 days to get in to see.
Perhaps.
Thank you.
No.
All right, thank you, doctor. You can step down. And any objections to this being excused?
Not in state.
If I may confirm. I would like the opportunity to recall him, Your Honor.
Judge, he's here from Texas and he's flying back. I don't, Texas free to fly back to which, but his flight is to go back to Texas.
He's excused.
Your Honor, may I ask him one last question before we leave?
Let's see if he's still out here.
Doctor, I'm going to show you what I've marked as Defendant's Exhibit 121. Can you tell me what that is?
It's a billing sheet,
And where is that billing sheet from?
Pediatric Orthopedic Associates.
Is that where you were working when you treated Layla?
Yes,
And is that reflect what Medicaid will cover and what your office will not accept?
I don't know.
Take a look at it and see if that refreshes your recollection.
So I don't know what Medicaid would cover, and I don't know what my office would accept.
Okay. But this is your office's sheet, isn't it?
Yes,
Okay. And this is what your office, what is covered by insurance or not covered, correct?
I don't know.
Your Honor, at this time, I will tender Defendant's Exhibit 121.
Considering it's already part of state 182, we have no objection.
All records.
We would ask for the defendant evidence that we may display, Your Honor.
Okay, it's admitted to separate exhibit and may display.
What does that document say, Doctor, with regards to your office policy?
You want me to read it?
Yes.
The following supplies are not covered by the above insurance companies. When distributed through this office, you can purchase any of these items listed below from our office, for which payment is due up front, or the physician can write a prescription, and we will gladly give you a list of supplies who can bill these insurance directly for purchase.
And is Medicaid one of the recipients of the insurances above?
Yes, it says Medicaid, Peach Care, Amerigroup, Peach State, and WellCare, which are all Medicaid.
Thank you, Doctor. I have nothing further.
Anything else?
Just very briefly, Doctor, just very briefly.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're fine. Did you even have any, do you recall any conversations with Ms. Rosenbaum whatsoever about any concerns paying for any of these?
No, and I'm not sure where this questioning is getting at, because there's nothing on that list that would have been needed to treat her fracture.
Nothing further.
Anything else?
Nothing further.
Thank you.
And you're excused. Thank you. Okay, this is time for us to take our morning break, so we'll take 15 minutes and then we'll come back. Thank you.
In 2015, who technically was your employer at that point?
Children's Orthopedics of Atlanta.
Were you officially under the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta umbrella at that point?
No, sir.
And your background, have you primarily worked in the orthopedics field?
Yes, for basically for 17 to 18 years I've been in orthopedics, and 15 to 16 of that exclusively with pediatrics.
Okay. Did you ever have an occasion to treat Laila Daniel?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And do you recall the date that you first treated Laila Daniel?
That was on October 23rd of 2015.
Your Honor, at this time I'd move into Evidence States Exhibit 187, which is the medical records from Children's Orthopedics of Atlanta. It does have an attached affidavit of certification of records.
Admitted.
Sir, if you ever need to look at the records, because it's not a memory test, so if you need to look at these, just let us know, okay? You said that she came in on October 23rd, 2019, correct?
Yes.
What was your knowledge at the time of any prior visits that she may have had with other providers?
The only visit I was aware of at the time was a visit with the Children's Healthcare Urgent Care at Hudson Ridge.
Were you aware of a visit with Dr. Duxbury?
No, sir.
What was the purpose of Layla visiting you that day?
She had a leg injury on her right leg, which turned out to be a fracture.
And do you recall how she came into your office that particular day? As far as, did she have any medical devices on her body at that time?
Oh, yes. She came in. She had been seen at the urgent care, and they had placed her in a splint, which is sort of almost like half of a cast, which is it's a fiberglass that goes down the back of the leg, and then it's wrapped on with like an ace bandage.
Okay. Now, do you recall who she was brought in by?
It was her mother, according to my notes. I can't recall, like I said, if it was foster mother. That part is not in my notes, whether it was foster or not. So,
Okay. She was brought in by someone identifying as her mother.
yes.
All right. And did you get a history from this person regarding how Layla hurt her leg?
Yes.
And what was the history that you received?
The history was that she was at a gymnastics facility, and a sibling had a class there. She wasn't there for a class, and she went out, was playing, and climbed on a balance beam, and had fell off the balance beam.
Was there anything mentioned about being on bars?
No, sir.
Was there anything mentioned about doing a pike?
No.
Did she indicate what happened on the balance beam?
Just that she climbed on it and that she fell off of it.
Did she provide you with the date of this injury?
Yes, it was October 18th of 2015.
And that would have been the day before she went to the urgent care center. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did at any point she mention anything about falling in the grandmother's yard?
No, sir.
When you did you see the X-rays?
Yes, sir.
All right. And was there a fracture there?
Yes, there was a fracture in her proximal tibia, which is the upper end of the bone in the lower leg.
Okay. At that time, based upon the history that you had, did you have any concerns at that particular time?
No, I did not.
What did you do as a result of having this particular fracture?
We at the time we placed her in a cast, which comes up above her knee to about mid-thigh and down to her foot.
Now, do you do an examination?
Yes, sir.
What do you examine?
And so typically, with my practice being acute injuries, our exam is pretty focused. And so typically it's mainly, then a lot of times we can just leave them in the shorts that they're in. If it's in one of the cooler months and they're in pants, then we provide them with, we have some paper type shorts that we put them in.
Did you have, from the examination, did you note any bruising that wasn't associated with the fracture?
Not anything out of the ordinary.
Did you note any bruising that was associated with the fracture?
Yes, there was some mild bruising around the fracture site.
Is that typical for this type of fracture?
Yes, that's very typical. And typically the bruising is more when they have a fracture, the bone bleeds underneath the skin, and that will come to the surface. And so typically you'll see that within 3 or 4 days after they have a fracture.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that you were not aware of her going to another orthopedic doctor, correct?
That is correct.
If you had known that, would that have caused any concern for you?
Yes, definitely so, as to why they were coming to a second provider.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Yes, that would concern me as to why they were not treated by that provider and are coming to a second provider, so there would have been definitely more questions asked at that point.
If they were referred to Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, would that have concern to go to the Eggleston campus? Would that have concerned you as well?
Yes.
And why is that?
Because typically, if any time that I myself send someone, refer them to the Eggleston campus or our Scottish Rite campus, which is the main 2 hospitals that we refer to, it's typically for either some type of surgical intervention or there's a suspicion of non-accidental trauma.
Now, what did you do? I think you said that you did some casting on the leg, correct? Can you
Yes.
describe to us where you put the cast on the leg?
Okay, so the cast basically runs from her mid-thigh down and out to the toes.
Showing you stage 157. Is that the? I don't think we need them off. Is that the cast? Is that the cast that you put on Layla?
Yes, sir.
How high up on the thigh? And I can't quite see it quite well in that one. How high up on the thigh does it go? If you can stand for us.
Mid-thigh, maybe 3/4 of the way up the thigh. There's a little bit of leeway.
If you could stand for us and just kind of indicate on yourself.
So typically it will go anywhere from mid-thigh to here. Just enough to give you enough room where it doesn't rub there
Okay.
too high.
Now, is there ever any bruising or chafing that people might get from having a cast on?
There could be some maybe a little mild chafing, not bruising though, not typically.
Now, is that the only time that you saw Laila Daniel?
No, sir.
And when was the second time that you saw her?
The second time was a week later, which was on 10/30.
And what was the purpose of that exam?
That was a follow-up visit for the fracture. Typically, with a fracture, if it is what we term a complete fracture, which means it goes all the way through the bone, those have potential to shift around even in a cast. And so we see them back in a week to make sure that they're staying lined up and not shifting and make sure they're healing properly.
How long is this exam normally? How long does it normally take?
That visit is usually very quick. Basically, we take a quick look at the cast, make sure everything looks like it's fitting well, and we shoot a quick x-ray, and that's basically the extent of the second visit.
Do you do any sort of examination on the rest of her body?
No, sir.
Was that the last time that you saw Laila Daniel?
No.
All right, when was the last time you saw
her? To get her cast off, and that was on November 13th of 2015.
And you said that was the to get her cast off?
Yes, sir.
How extensive of an exam or visit is this? Would this type of visit be?
It's somewhere between the other two. Basically, you do an exam of that extremity. Typically, I'll kind of compare it with the other extremity and show the parents, because typically when they've been in a cast like that, they'll have some muscle atrophy from not using that leg, and so usually I'll kind of compare and show this to show the parents, hey, look, this leg's going to be weaker, and they'll have a little bit of a limp for a little while afterwards.
Okay. Do you recall who brought her in?
Her mother again at that time, and I believe there was a gentleman with her too at that time. I'm not sure if it was father. I'm not sure.
Okay.
To be honest.
So the clothing. Do you recall the clothing that she was in?
She had on and I think the first visit it was the one that I recall that she had on it was sort of a Halloween themed outfit. It had kind of some flared little legs at the bottom of it. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it had flared legs.
I'll show you Suspense Exhibit 10. Is this what you observed her wearing, or not?
Yes.
And was that
That was it.
that was on the last day?
That was. I can't remember if it was the first one or the last one. I remember the outfit. Like, to be honest, I can't 100% say.
And Judge, I would just note for the record that the stipulated date is November 14th of 2015. And that was the same day that she came in to see you, correct?
The 13th.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yes,
the 13th.
13th.
My bad.
Yes.
Tell me about the, did you notice anything at that exam that seemed out of the ordinary to you?
No, sir.
And again, what parts of the body did you examine or look at on this type of visit?
Mainly the affected leg. The other leg, like I said, for comparison purposes. But and if the rest of the body, we don't really examine at that point.
Okay. And did you notice anything when you took off the cast that seemed unusual?
Nothing out of the ordinary.
Okay. I want to show you what's been previously admitted as State Exhibit 54. This particular, do you recognize the area of the body that this would be?
That is looks like the inner thigh.
Okay. And is that the same leg that the cast was on?
It appears to be, yes.
Now, was there any indication that the cast caused that injury?
No.
Would the cast have even gone up that high?
No, the cast was, first of all, the cast wasn't up that high, and second of all, I would have noted that too. If I saw that, because that would be unusual to see that.
I want to show you State Exhibit 56, which is the flip side, looking at that same injury. Again, is there any indication that the cast caused that injury?
No, sir.
Did you see anything even remotely appearing like that when you took the cast off?
No.
All right. Would the cast have even been that high?
It should not have been one, no.
And I'll show you what's been admitted as State Exhibit 57. Did you see any of those bruises on Layla when she visited you on the 13th?
Not that I recall. So, not that I recall seeing any bruises there. So.
Okay. And was that the last time that you examined Laila Daniel?
Yes, sir.
Nothing further this time.
Thank you. Cross.
Mr. Coppinger, Dr. Coppinger?
I'm a physician assistant.
Physician
Mr.
assistant.
Coppinger.
Mr. Coppinger, my name is Corrine Mull. I'm going to ask you a number of questions. I just ask that you let me know if you don't understand my question, or if I'm not speaking loud enough, if you'd let me know. Mr. Coppinger, you saw Layla on 10. The first time you saw her was on which date?
On October 23rd.
On October 23rd.
Yes.
And you had been told that symptoms had begun on what date?
On October 18th.
Were they given you a date, or were they just told you several days before?
They would have given me a date.
Okay.
That's One thing, if you talk to my staff at the office, that's one thing I'm very particular about is I want a date of injury on there because sometimes when they're bringing patients back and doing that and putting the stuff in, some people tend to want to put last Tuesday or something like that. And I'm very particular and I talk to them all the time. I want the date. I want the date on the chart of the date of injury.
And you noted that she was well-nourished and in no distress, correct?
Yes, correct.
And how did she come to you? Did she walk or was she carried in?
At that point, she was carried.
She was carried in. And you said that she had full range of motion, correct? Full ROM.
Yes, yes.
You noted that she had no tenderness.
Not on the. I would have noted that she had tenderness. Yes, she did have tenderness.
She
On the
didn't
right.
have tenderness or she had no tenderness?
Yes, no, she had tenderness on the right lower extremity. The left lower extremity, my note says that had no tenderness, but the right lower extremity did have tenderness.
And lesions, abrasions, bruises, or lacerations, what did you say?
Nothing that was out of the ordinary. With kids, the majority of kids that come in will have a bruise here or there. That's not uncommon, but nothing was noted that was out of the ordinary.
Is this type of bruising what you would call out of the ordinary?
That could be considered ordinary, depending on the kid.
And you wrote down that what the x-rays showed you was a minimally impacted proximal tibia fracture,
Yes.
correct? What does minimally impacted mean?
Means basically when we say impacted, kind of crushed down just a little bit.
Okay, so wouldn't require a great deal of force?
Sort of a medium amount of force, I would say.
Okay.
So
Sufficient force that a 2-year-old could exert when falling.
if they fell from a little bit of a height, yes. The most common way we see these is trampolines, which have force coming up, and that's in this age group. That's the most common thing that we see is from a trampoline. The force of the trampoline. Usually there's an older kid and a younger kid, and the trampoline's coming up and the kid is coming down. And that's just the most common, by far the most common way we see it. Probably 90% of them are.
So, but gymnastics did not seem to be out of the ordinary. to
No,
you.
if she was on a balance beam and fell off, that seemed plausible.
Where in your notes did you say that there was a balance beam?
So with my notes, I did state specifically that there was a balance beam. And in my notes, it said that there was that it was a sports injury, and that's basically from memory that it was a balance beam.
But could you be mistaken? Could it have been some other type of fall from gymnastics?
I specifically remember Mom saying she climbed on the balance beam and fell off, and that she wasn't taking a class, that it was a sibling that was taking a class, and she was just there, and she went over and climbed up on the beam and fell off.
And when you saw her, she was in a diaper and a pull-up, right?
I believe that she probably had a pull-up on. I can't say 100% certain.
And you didn't see any cuts or lacerations or bruising
No.
anywhere?
No, not anything out of the ordinary.
And you didn't see any evidence that she was favoring her arm or holding her arm as if it hurt?
No, ma'am.
You didn't notice anything having to do with her arm as being painful or tender?
No, with my exam, I didn't notice her not using it or any kind of deformity or anything like that. I didn't do a specific exam on the arm, but I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary with the arm at the time.
And she didn't hold it up to you and say it hurts or anything?
No, ma'am.
Okay. You said she appeared well-nourished and without distress, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Now, what did you put her in when you say you put her in a cast?
It basically a cast is it's made of fiberglass. It's wrapped on there. Underneath there's cotton padding underneath there, and initially you put on a cotton, what we call a stockinette, which is kind of like a long sock that goes underneath there, and then you wrap cotton padding, and then you wrap the fiberglass as it's wet, and then as it dries, it hardens.
And did you put her in a boot?
She would have been given a what we term a cast shoe, which is just a little thing that straps over the bottom of the cast so she can put weight on it.
And tell me if you would, did you give her any type, is it typical with children that sometimes you give them a piece of the stockinette or a piece of the cotton
Yes, sometimes we do. Yeah,
You-
sometimes they'll be in there and they'll kind of play with it, and we'll let them have that. Yes.
And do you recall doing that for Layla?
I don't recall specifically. No.
But it would not surprise you.
No, it would not.
Do you recall putting, well, let me ask you this. Why did you put a full cast? Would it have been appropriate to have left her in a splint?
Not typically. The reason being is the splints don't support the fracture as well. With a splint, they're not able to get up and weight bear on that splint, and it's really hard to keep a young child off of it to start with, so they need the extra protection of a cast. And also a splint can loosen more over time and can cause some problems, especially with the heel area of getting pressure sores with younger kids.
So leaving her for a week in a cast or a day leaving her for a day or a week in a splint would not have been proper medical treatment. would it?
No. For short term, it is. For long term, it's not. For short term, the reason that they initially splint them as opposed to casting them is, well, there's a couple of reasons. One is so when they come to see us, we can get a good exam of our own. And then number two is for the first 2 or 3 days, the fractures tend to swell. Okay, and if you put a cast on immediately, the cast can get too tight. Whereas a splint, because the front of it is just an ace bandage that it gives, and so it that's the reason we use the splint. Usually, typically, depending on the fracture, anywhere from one day to some fractures, we leave them in a splint for as much as a week or more. Okay, if it's a really bad fracture that we're really concerned with the swelling.
That was not the case in this
So-
situation, was it?
No. This.
And did you give her a cast shoe?
Yes, we would have given her a cast.
Did you give her a walker boot or a cam walker?
No, ma'am.
Did you do fiberglass casting?
Yes, ma'am.
Let me show you what's been marked as States Exhibit 182. Tell me, if you would, which of those did you do for Laila Daniel?
So. We would have done fiberglass casting. This is not anything from my office, though.
I understand, I'm just asking you to
Yeah,
look
this
at
is
the list.
fiberglass casting, and then I'm trying to see if there's I don't see a cast shoe on there. I just see the walker boot, so I don't see the cast shoe on there. But typically, I think, and okay, yes, so cast shoe, yes.
Anything else on this list that you put on her?
No, that would be all.
Thank you.
So.
Let me show you what I have marked as Defendant's Exhibit 122. And ask you if this is the cast that you put on Layla.
Yes, ma'am. That is the cast, and that is our appears to be one of our cast shoes also. So,
So she was meant to walk on it.
yes, ma'am.
In fact, the more the better.
Typically, the weight bearing, the act of weight bearing, will stimulate it to heal a little faster.
So the more she walks on it, the better it is for her. At this time, Your Honor, is that a yes?
Yes, ma'am.
At this time, I would tender number 122 into the record, Your Honor, and ask to publish. If you would show us the fiberglass casting.
The pink is the fiberglass, and then the black is the stockinette that goes underneath it, and then between those two there is cotton.
And what's on her wrist?
That
Is that not a piece of the stockinette?
Yes, it appears to be a piece of stockinette.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
All right, thank you. May you read it?
Let me ask you this. Can different providers use different materials?
Yes, to an extent.
Okay. And you mentioned you don't know what, that's not from your office, correct?
Yes, that's
All right. Let me ask you this. Ms. Mole asked you whether or not it is appropriate to leave a child in a splint for several days, correct?
Yes.
All right. Well, would it have been appropriate to leave a child in a splint and send them to Children's Healthcare of Atlanta for further evaluation and treatment?
Yes, sir.
Would it have been appropriate for the person who is caring for them to ignore that medical advice?
No, that would not be appropriate.
Did Ms. Rosenbaum ever mention to you anything about, during these follow-up visits, anything about Layla having any issues falling in the cast?
Not that I recall. Obviously, any kid is going to be with the cast on is going to be a little more unsteady, but there was nothing that I recall.
Okay, nothing that stands out to you. Okay, nothing further, Judge.
So it would not be unexpected that she might trip or give way.
Yes, that could be very possible.
And at your office, when you send somebody to Eggleston, do you give them a sheet of paper that says that you should go to Eggleston? This is the address. This is who you should ask for.
Typically, yes.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
No, brother. Okay, thank you. You can sit down. Any objections to this? Any excuse? And your excuse from this. State calls next witness.
State calls Carmen Scott.
Carmen Scott. Right up here, please, ma'am. Just go down.
Have you raised right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you shall give this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
Yes.
And if you could state and spell your name for the record, you can have a seat.
My name is Carmen Scott, Karmenscott.
And Ms. Scott, how are you currently employed?
I work for the Henry County Health Department.
What do you do for the Henry County Health Department?
I provide Children's First services for participants that are referred to the program.
What is Children's First?
Children's First is a referral and resource program. We do family assessments and developmental screenings, and we refer the families to other services that they may need, like WIC services or Babies Can't Wait services, DFACs, pediatricians. We give them phone numbers and contact information.
Are certain families required to have a child's first assessment?
The program is designed to be free and voluntary. However, DFACS strongly encourages their children that are in the foster system to be assessed.
And how long have you been in the position you're in now?
Since 2015,
When in 2015 did you start?
September.
Now, on October 28th of 2015, did you see Millie Place and Laila Daniel?
Yes, I did.
And how come you saw them on October 28th?
Excuse me?
How come you saw the children?
Oh, they were referred through the DFACS system to be assessed for developmental screenings.
Who brought them?
Jennifer Rosenbaum.
When you do a screening, do you do a full body exam?
No. The screenings are mostly socio-economical screenings. It's developmental. The parent or guardian fills out the paperwork ahead of time, and I just review it with them. It's all paper. We don't do any physical assessment at all.
And is the paperwork they fill out, what is it called?
Ages and Stages questionnaire. It's called ASQ. I use the ASQ 3 version, and it's a standard screening. Pediatricians also use the same screenings when they do well checks.
And is the screening different depending on, or is the questionnaire different depending on the child's age?
Yes, it goes by age. It's 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, so forth, up until 5 years old, or 60 months.
Now, with Millie's assessment, did you use the questionnaire with her?
Yes.
Okay. And did you use the 48-month-old questionnaire?
Yes, if that was her age. It is according to age, so depending on her age at the time.
And you indicated that the paperwork is filled out by the child's guardian?
Correct.
So in Millie's case, that would have been Jennifer Rosenbaum?
Yes.
And how did Jennifer answer the question, has your child had any medical problems in the last several months?
I'm not sure right this minute. I'd have to look at the form.
But looking at the questionnaire assists you in answering that question? Looked at Millie's questionnaire.
Oh.
Would that help you answer the
Yes,
question?
if I looked at the, yes, because I don't remember word for word. Oh, okay, yes, so it says no. That is true.
And how did Jennifer answer the question, do you have any concerns about your child's behavior?
She answered no.
And how did Jennifer answer the question, does anything about your child worry you?
She noted that, yes, she had a concern that she has a semi-attachment issue. Semi-attachment issues is how it's written.
On Millie's questionnaire, was there any concern noted about lying?
Not according to this page.
In Millie's questionnaire, was there any notation about a history of abuse regarding Millie?
Not on this questionnaire.
How did Millie act during the appointment?
Well-behaved, quiet.
Is it your practice to take a photo of the child when they come in for an appointment?
Yes, the clerks do that at the front desk when they're first being processed. They check their income, Medicaid, and they take a picture for their medical record. It's just a headshot through glass.
Through glass, you said?
Through the glass, yeah, through the glass.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Let me show you what I marked as State's Exhibit 188 and see if you recognize it.
Oh, yes, I did.
And how do you recognize it?
Well, that's Millie, because she had that purple bow.
And is that how Millie appeared to you when you saw her in October 2015?
Yes.
Time I tender State's Exhibit 188 into evidence and ask for permission to publish.
Admitted to be published.
This is how Millie appeared at her appointment. Ms. Scott?
Yeah.
Now I want to turn your attention to Layla's questionnaire. Would looking at her questionnaire help you in answering some of the questions?
Yes, please.
On Layla's questionnaire, how did Jennifer answer the question, has your child had any medical problems in the last several months?
She answered that she had a fractured tibia shin bone from a fall at gymnastics.
How did Jennifer answer the question, do you have any concerns about your child's behavior?
When she gets angry, she has fits of rage.
How did Jennifer answer the question, does anything about your child worry you?
Yes, bio mother's meth use during pregnancy.
Was there any mention of concern of a history of child abuse?
No.
Did Jennifer identify any other areas of concern with regards to Layla?
No.
How did Layla act during the appointment?
She was very quiet. She was being held because she still had a cast on her leg. So she was being held through the entire visit.
And did you also or someone at your office take a photo of Layla on that date?
Yes.
Can I approach the witness here?
You may.
I'm going to show you what I've previously marked as State's Exhibit 189 and see if you recognize that photograph.
Yes.
And is that a fair and accurate picture of how Layla appeared to you on October 28, 2015?
Yes.
And at this time, I tender State's Exhibit 189 into evidence and ask for permission to publish.
Admitted to be published.
And you indicated that Layla was being held the entire time because she had a cast on?
Yes.
And who was holding her?
Jennifer.
Approximately how long was the appointment that you had?
Maybe 20 to 30 minutes.
And were services recommended for either Layla or Millie?
Well, the program itself, the assessment is completed with the developmental screenings, and the monitoring is not a requirement, and so she opted out of that.
And when you say she, who is that?
Jennifer. That was mom.
No further questions. Thank you.
I have no questions.
No questions. All right, now, thank you. You can step down.
Okay.
Objection to this being excused.
No, Your Honor.
Thank you.
You're excused.
Thank you.
State call next witness.
State call, Tricia Blissett.
Tricia Blissett. Ready, please. further.
Do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give should be the truth and the whole truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Please lower your hand. You can have a seat.